listening to the Not Your Average Culture podcast, where we have candid conversations about personal growth, business, and creativity. Because, let's be honest, creative or not, life can get messy, especially if you are a creative entrepreneur. But you don't have to go at it alone. There's a whole community and culture around the lifestyle of creatives. So here on this podcast, I'm making the space to have open conversations with a wide range of dynamic people about how to successfully maintain your business, keep your sanity while owning your authenticity and staying inspired along this journey. I'm your host, Chardonnay. Let's get to it. Hello, what's up everyone, and welcome back to the Not Your Average Culture podcast. It's been a while since I've been able to sit down and really just chop it up and chat with you all and share with you some of the interesting folks I've been connecting with and some of the projects I've personally been working on. And honestly, let's address the elephant in the room for my people who regularly supported this podcast. The reason why I took a break from podcasting is because I was burnt out. That's it. That's all. Your girl was burnt out. As I began to dust off my microphone and prepare this podcast for you all, I was thinking, where do I even begin to part my lips after ghosting you all for so long? How do you bounce back into the thing you were so into at one point after taking a break for so long? And the short answer is, you just do. You pick back up where you left off and keep going until you decide to take another break. So, in today's episode, I'm going to be talking about navigating and getting through a creative rut, pushing through burnout, and just sharing my own personal experience with creative fatigue. I'm also going to be sharing some advice that has stuck with me, and I use it as a reference point anytime I'm feeling tired or overwhelmed. Although I'm sharing my personal experience, it may seem like I'm giving you all advice, but I'm really actually talking to myself out loud and creating this episode as a reminder and as a voice note to my future self to come back and listen to this episode if I ever experience burnout or creative fatigue in the future. And it's also here and available on the podcast for you all, for those who may need a little creative boost or pep talk, because let's face it, that tired, burnt out feeling is inevitable. It just comes with the territory of being a creative. It's kind of like when you decide to take a trip and travel, you know, that feeling of feeling like you need a vacation from vacation. While it might be exciting and fun, but sometimes you may run into a delayed flight or lost luggage or encountering an unfamiliar culture or language barrier. Or if you're pursuing a higher education, that degree may feel rewarding, but it also comes with some sleepless nights, exams, deadlines, financial costs, or maybe even parenting. It has its own joys, but it has its own occasional parenting dilemmas and responsibilities. I'm basically saying that burnout is bound to pop up at some point in life, but the goal is to not stay tired, to not get stuck, and to find something that will help you keep going. It's like on one hand, I'm enjoying this experience, but on the flip side, I didn't expect all these other unplanned situations to come up. And when the unexpected happens and alters your plans, how do you get back into your flow, get back on schedule, or get back to a place where you are enjoying the process? I think the same thing occurs if you have ever experienced creative burnout. So that's my intention with this episode, is to share what has helped me get through those challenging moments. And I'm also going to be sharing a bit about what to expect in this upcoming season for the podcast. The first thing I'm going to be touching on is getting connected back to what motivated you to start in the first place. Can you remember the very first time you decided to start a new project, learn a new skill, or accomplishing a goal you had made for yourself? Think back to a time where you felt excited about something you made, or maybe it wasn't something you made. Maybe it was something you did. Maybe it was you made a recipe you found online and it actually tasted good and turned out the way you expected. Or maybe the feeling you got when you got your degree, purchased your first home or car, or landed a job, or finally getting the courage to talk to your crush, or feeling accomplished for sticking to your commitment of going to the gym. Whatever it is that you are working on or feeling uninspired to keep doing, think back to that feeling of what got you excited to start in the first place. For me, I remember exactly where I was at the date when I got the very first notification that my podcast was live, published, and publicly out into the world and on the interwebs. I felt proud, like I had finally accomplished this thing that I was so curious and excited about doing, and here I was sticking to my goal, and I had finally did the thing. After it was public, then I got excited about sharing the interviews and conversations and all the things I was learning. It was an unexplainable and just pure joy and excitement I had around this podcast. However, going back to what I mentioned earlier, sometimes when we sign up for stuff we are passionate about or excited to do, we don't always realize what else comes with the territory. Now, hindsight, when I created this podcast, especially in the beginning as an independent podcaster, I didn't realize I had created a whole job for myself, okay? A whole job, you hear me? Outside of my regular day-to-day job. So at some point, things just were not aligning. So to give you all an example for those who might have just stumbled upon my podcast for the very first time, my day job, I'm a videographer. I mainly film and edit video content. It can be for an event recap, social media, websites, a documentary, newsletter, pretty much anywhere and everywhere someone may be requesting for me to work on a project. Now, where things sort of got out of alignment for me is I had this passion project, which was my podcast, that I would host and independently work on the side. If you go back and listen to past episodes, this platform has allowed me to chat with other professionals and creatives in different industries, such as authors, DJs, dancers, investors, and a few other types of folks and entrepreneurs, all while sprinkling in bits and pieces of my personal journey of how I was navigating life as a creative entrepreneur, which was really great and going well. However, it took up a lot of my free time. And when you are someone who works in video or creates content, you know that your hands can get tied up pretty quickly between filming, editing, and then to add on podcasting, booking guests for the podcast, promoting the podcast, while also trying to have somewhat of a social life and all the other things that come up in life. It was all these other things that were inevitable that come with the territory of being a podcaster that I didn't realize would lead to me being burnt out. So the math was no longer mathing, and I decided to take a break. I think most people who have a creative outlet, a side hustle, or a hobby, I think at some point we all have experienced creative burnout, and you have to know when to take a break, pivot, or let some things go. Now, I don't personally have kids, but I can imagine that whatever it is you are passionate about, it can feel a lot like having a child or a baby, meaning you want to be involved in every part of the process and watch your baby grow. However, like parents, even if you are a pet parent, you might love your child or your pet, but every now and then you need a break, a babysitter, or just some time to figure out, how can I show up for this person, this animal, or passion project so it has the space to grow while also not wearing yourself out at the same time. So this next chapter of my journey will be called Flow. The theme is going to be operating in flow. And the reason why it's called this is because that's how I would like for things in my life to operate. I want some type of autonomy. Now, there's a difference between going with the flow and operating in a capacity where things naturally connect seamlessly and work well together. And I'll talk about that more in a bit. But so it's clear, I'm not just going with the flow of things. I'm just trying to be more mindful about making sure I'm not creating extra things for me to do that prevent me from focusing on my interests and goals. Now, if you follow me over on YouTube, earlier this year when I took my solo trip for my birthday, I thought a lot about and reflected on a popular term that is being spread on the interwebs, which is soft life. And if you are unfamiliar with this term, I recommend you browse the web. But I'm sure at this point you might have heard it, and however you came across it, you'll realize that everyone kind of has their own personal definition of what this means. And for me, I had to figure out, what does a soft life look like Or what does that mean for me, especially as someone who is a creative entrepreneur and someone who is always doing all of the things? So when I actually digested that, and what I'm assuming this might mean for a lot of other people is, it means essentially we don't want to be stressed out, okay? I don't know about y'all, but I want things to flow. Meaning having time to take the breaks I need to rest and recharge and not experience burnout. Being able to afford to indulge in the things that bring me joy without breaking the bank. And finding that work-life balance we all desire, where we have a job or a career path that pays a livable wage that matches inflation and does not stress you the fuck out, okay? I'm just keeping it real. I jokingly say this from time to time, but adulthood can be the worst hood. It has its moments where it's great, but also y'all know, life be life and it comes with the territory. So this leads me to what you can expect to hear on this season and upcoming episodes on the podcast. I'm going to be talking about the culture of creatives because it's definitely a different type of lifestyle if you or someone you know has decided to pursue a career path in the arts. Maybe you are an author, an illustrator, content creator, videographer, or sometimes even a hairstylist or nail tech, or someone who is creating some type of good or service. Sometimes when you choose this career path, life looks a little bit different. And so I'm going to be talking about my experience with trying to cultivate a life that flows as someone who is a creative entrepreneur. Basically, someone who wears many different hats. And I'm going to be doing this by talking to a bunch of folks that I have collaborated with, whether they are clients or other creatives that I've worked with on a project within this past year or so, and even folks who are just trying to facilitate a sense of community amongst others in their own way. So one way I'm sort of tapping into my own version of a soft life as a creative entrepreneur is I'm going to be interviewing folks that I have worked with within this past year, people I've directly connected with, collaborated with, or has had some sort of impact on me within this year. This will allow me to kind of recap my year and reconnect with people who are already within my network or I cross paths with, and cut back on any scheduling conflicts so I can still show up for my baby, my passion project, this podcast, and for you all in this community. So let's talk a bit about creative burnout, fatigue, or creative ruts. I don't know about anyone else, but I think creative burnout occurs when you have a lot going on and you feel like you are spread thin. It can be almost paralyzing when you have a to-do list filled with a ton of tasks, but not enough energy or time in a day to get it all done. Or maybe you are in a place where you're just not feeling inspired to do anything, or the thought of even delegating a task feels overwhelming. Trust me, I have experienced almost all of the many different ways to experience some form of burnout, whether it's dealing with grief while running a business, being spread thin with a ton of tasks, to maybe being in a creative rut of not knowing how to take a task or project to the next level. So let's talk about some of the ways I have navigated through this, because let's be real, you'll never really overcome it. You just come up with ways to get your momentum back up and going. Another reason why the theme for me is finding my flow is because not only is collaborating important, but also learning to delegate. If you are someone who is naturally a doer, meaning you're always doing some sort of project, maybe hosting an event, or you have an idea for a side hustle, when you're a certain creative or doer, sometimes it's easy for you to get in your own way. Just because you know how to do all the things, so you try to do all of the things. I realize in my own personal experience is just because you know how to do all the things doesn't mean you need to take on everything. And I'm going to give y'all a few examples, and this might be a little controversial because currently in the Black hair community, a lot of hairstylists tell you to come hair wash, blow dry with no product in it. And if you look at it from a business aspect, that's their way of setting a boundary and eliminating one less thing they have to do off of their plate so they can focus on the main thing that requires their attention. And I personally respect it and I get it, especially since I've had moments where I've been in their shoes. Another example is, as an independent podcaster, going back to what I said in the beginning, I was creating a whole extra job for myself and I didn't even realize it. It wasn't until I took a break from constantly doing that I could take a step back and look at everything from a big picture view and connect the dots and say, you know what? Instead of me booking guests that are outside of my immediate circle, how can I get back to making this flow and make this make sense with the things I already do on a day-to-day basis? In some cases, it can work out in your favor and potentially create one less thing for you to do when you can learn to collaborate, delegate, and sometimes build community or a business around things you are already doing. For me, in my own personal experience, one of the ways I have been able to push through creative burnout is by listing out all of my interests, getting real about the things that bring me the most joy, and figuring out how can I find a way to free up my time so I can focus on the things that really move me closer towards my own personal goals. One thing that I really value is I like spending time making videos on YouTube and interviewing folks for my podcast. YouTube allows me to share the cool stuff I'm doing, and filming and interviewing people to come on my podcast allows me to connect with other people and learn about what's going on in their world or things I wouldn't typically talk about or encounter on a regular day-to-day basis. It gives me a peek at what's going on in other people's circles and what else is going on in the world outside of the news. So in order for me to make time for those things, I had to personally assess something that might seem simple, like doing laundry or going to the grocery store, and asking myself, do I really want to spend 2 hours going to the grocery store, standing in a long line, going aisle by aisle looking for groceries, or could I grocery shop online and quickly drive to the store and do a curbside pickup instead? Or even better, get them delivered. Instead of me spending hours at the laundromat washing clothes, what would it look like for me to invest in a wash and fold service? Or what would it look like to stop paying to live in a high-priced apartment for the convenience of having a washer and dryer to wash clothes that I don't want to wash and fold anyways, but moving to a unit so that way I can cut down on my expenses and indulge in a wash and fold service and take one less thing off of my plate? Or how can I reduce the number of clothes I have so I don't have to wash as much? Y'all get what I'm trying to say. I've been trying to find ways to eliminate things I don't want to do that take up my time so I can instead spend the time focusing my energy on things that allow me to continue to work on my craft and move me closer towards my personal goals. Now, I'm going to give you all another perspective. If you're someone experiencing creative burnout, take a break and evaluate what things can you change so you can spend time doing that extra craft, the extra hobby, that project, or whatever it is that you're into. Your thing may not be grocery shopping. Maybe you enjoy doing that, but maybe you really want someone to come to clean your home once a month. Or maybe you need a break from your kids so you can spend an hour indulging in your hobby or growing your business. Whatever having a soft life looks like for you, try to identify your roadblocks, what's getting in your way, and what can you cut back on or delegate to someone else so it gives you the time to do the things so you don't feel spread thin. Most of the time when I have felt uninspired or in a creative rut, it's because I didn't have the time to get inspired. I didn't have the time to pull my head up and take a breath from all the things I was doing and take a trip for leisure to learn about other cultures, or time to read a book that might spark an idea or just explore and experiment. If you are creative, a big part of what makes you a creative is having that time to explore, experiment, play, and time to simply rest, recharge, and think. Creative entrepreneurs' ability to be self-aware, look at things from different perspectives, or provide a service comes from you having the ability and the capacity to think differently, but you can't do that if you are tired, creating from a place of stress, or uninspired. And the only way I've been able to navigate through that is by resting, identifying the roadblocks, and being committed to the end goal despite what I may be currently feeling or going through. Now, I'm going to share with you all some advice that was given to me and has stuck with me. This is some advice that was shared with me by an aunt and an uncle. And the advice that they shared is never let the world make you bitter. And if you are tired, maybe you need to revisit the thing you are working on at a later time. Now, again, this came from two separate people and at different points in my life. But the reason why those two pieces of advice in particular have stuck with me is because when I was chatting with them, I was talking about how I was stressed out about school, or how I was thinking about not going to this party because I was so stressed out about an exam or my studies or whatever the case may be. And the reason why that has stuck with me is because I realized you will always encounter some sort of challenge or some sort of hiccup, or there will always be some type of thing that may be in your way. And as someone who is a creative or a creative entrepreneur, you can't let those things steal your joy, steal your spark, and stop you from indulging in your creativity. Those are the things that make you you, and we can't let the woes of life get us down. You have to keep going, and you have to keep moving and pushing forward. So this season, I'm going to dive into how I'm attempting to make things flow as someone who is a creative entrepreneur, someone who has a full-time job, but also balancing a side hustle and also trying to indulge in my creative interests. I'm going to be talking to folks who, again, I have collaborated with. I'm going to be chatting with clients that I've worked with. And I'm also going to be talking to someone who has experience with what it means to be in community with others and how to find your tribe. Is also really important to find your tribe of people that can support you through whatever it is that you're working towards. I think that in any field that you're in, whether you are a stay-at-home mom, you have a 9-to-5, you have a creative side hustle, or maybe you're a full-time entrepreneur, I think this season there's going to be a little something for almost everyone that can speak to almost every individual who is just out there trying to figure out how to get your life and make things flow. And how are we all doing this whole work-life balance thing? Even though we hear that there's no such thing as a work-life balance, there are some people out here that are coming pretty damn close to achieving it. And so we're going to have some real honest conversations about a variety of different topics. So expect to hear me talking about all things from love life, work life, running a business, to crafting. It's all connected, and it can sometimes get a little messy, but it doesn't have to be. We just have to be creative about how we are approaching these things. So stay tuned for this new lineup of guests. I'm really excited to be shifting gears and taking a new approach. I'm also looking forward to connecting with you all, the people who tune in and support the podcast. I recently launched a Patreon, and I'm very active on YouTube, so be sure to connect with me online. That's all I have to share with you all for today. So peace, love, and everything in between. I'm out.